opening. There's this feeling we all have now. You're scrolling, or maybe you just had a private conversation, and suddenly an ad appears for that exact thing. It's uncannily specific. Or you fall down a rabbit hole of videos, each one seemingly designed to make you just a little bit angrier, a little more certain of your worldview. We've all just kind of accepted this as how the algorithm works. But I recently came across a fascinating, almost alarming text and make a bold claim that this isn't just a side effect of the internet, it is the internet. It argues that Karl Marx was wrong, or at least completely outdated. The real power today isn't controlling the means of production, the factories and the land. The real power is controlling the means of cognition, the power to shape your perception, to manage your emotions, to harvest your attention, and ultimately to control reality itself. When I first read this, it felt profound. But it also sparked two big questions. How true is this, really? Is our attention really the new labor and our brain the new factory? And second, is this some wild, original new theory? Or is it just a clever repackaging of ideas we've already heard? That's what we're going to find out.
Yeah, it's quite the framing, isn't it? And what's really striking is how the sources we looked at seem to, well, validate that shift pretty clearly. They argue this isn't just, another economic downturn or political squabble.
It's deeper.
It's a cognitive crisis. The core idea, the thesis, is that power's really moved. It's not about the factory floor anymore. It's about the mind. And defending consciousness, defining it, that's become the central struggle of our age.
Okay, let's unpack that right away. The means of cognition, it sounds huge. It's not just Facebook feeds, is it? It feels bigger, like infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely. It's the whole cognitive scaffolding of society. When the sources talk about the means of cognition, they mean the entire architecture we use to think, remember, learn, communicate.
So algorithms, but also...
Algorithms, definitely, but also the giant media platforms, the education systems, how we use language, digital archives, the networks themselves. All of it. And the idea behind it is terrifyingly simple, really. Whoever governs these systems, whoever decides what you see, what gets remembered, what pops into your head right now, basically governs reality itself.
Wow. And this whole idea is positioned as like an update or even a replacement for the old Marxist view of power. That's a really bold claim.
Mm-hmm.
How does controlling perception suddenly trump controlling, factories and stuff?
Well, Marx's big insight, right, was that controlling the material stuff, the factories, the land, the resources, that's what defined power, because that determined how people lived, which then shaped how they thought.
Matter determines mind, basic stuff.
Exactly. But the argument now is that the digital age flips that script completely. If you can control the architecture of thought, you control perception. And if you control perception, well, you get to shape the matter of shared reality.
So consciousness isn't just reflecting the economy anymore.
It is the economy, or at least the main battleground. Human attention, that's the new commodity being mined, not just physical labor.
Okay, that sets up our mission perfectly then. We need to trace how this philosophical idea actually plays out. So first, the economics, this surveillance capitalism idea, then the mechanics, the algorithms doing the work, and finally, what we can actually do about it, this cognitive liberation.
Right. Let's dive into that first big claim. The 21st century is ruled by cognition control, not production control. The old industrial truth power lies with the guy who owns the assembly line that's basically obsolete now, according to these sources.
It's like the ultimate upgrade in exploitation, isn't it? The factory isn't just a building anymore. It's sort of plugged into our heads. The old factory worker made, cars. Now we, the digital subjects, we produce data.
Our mind is the factory floor.
Yeah. And the kind of work is totally different.
Totally. The industrial worker, they sold a set number of hours, physical energy, clock in, clock out. But the digital subject, we're selling something much more, pervasive. Our attention, our emotional responses, what we intend to do next.
All right, let's make this concrete. There's that story of Arthur, the gig worker. That really brings it home.
Arthur's story is, it's stark. His grandfather worked on the Ford assembly line, right? 8 hours a day, physical work. He went home, the factory noise stopped.
But Arthur's
a top-tier gig worker. He's juggling, 10 different social media accounts for marketing firms? His job is literally to manufacture engagement, liking, sharing, commenting, creating a social buzz.
And he's doing this for?
14 hours a day, selling pure attention. His mind is always on. It's not just the hours, it's the kind of tired he gets. Grandpa is physically exhausted. Arthur is cognitively spent, always switching identities, chasing clicks, generating that raw material.
For someone else's profit.
Exactly. The smell of factory oil is replaced by the constant ping of notifications.
It's a really powerful image. And this relentless mental labor. It feeds a specific kind of economic engines, not just ads as we used to know them. The source is called surveillance capitalism, SE.
Right, surveillance capitalism. It's defined as this very specific, unprecedented economic logic. Some call it a rogue mutation of capitalism because it relies on concentrating wealth, knowledge, and power in ways we've just never seen before.
Okay, so how do the sources define it? Like, what is it descriptively, and how does it function as a control system?
Well, descriptively, SE is basically a new economic order that just takes human experience.
Our lives.
Yeah, our lives, our experiences, and claims it as free raw material. For what? For hidden commercial practices, extraction, prediction, sales. It's like they just asserted this right to turn private life into data points.
Without asking.
Pretty much. And normatively, the argument is that it's a parasitic logic. The actual making of useful things, goods and services, that becomes secondary. It's subordinated to this global machine that's all about modifying our behavior and capturing the leftover data.
So the app, or the smart device, that's just the bait on the hook.
Yeah.
The real goal isn't the thing itself, but using the thing to get behavioral material.
That's the core idea. And the profit engine, that comes from something specific they call behavioral surplus. This is the absolute game changer, the zero-cost asset that SE really pioneered. The sources trace it back to like 2001, right after the dot-com bubble burst. Google, for example, was under massive pressure to actually make money.
Right, the ground zero moment. So
Yeah.
what was the big light bulb moment? How did they turn this leftover data into cash?
The realization was that all the extra data collected around every interaction, stuff that wasn't strictly needed just to make the search engine work better, was incredibly valuable.
What kind of data are we talking about?
Oh, everything. Browsing history, yeah, but also how long you hesitated before clicking something, your location, even typos you make, stuff that used to be just digital exhaust, waste.
And they just decided, hey, this isn't waste.
They unilaterally declared it proprietary, their property.
Yeah.
And figured out it was profitable, took the digital trash and spun it into gold. That was the critical move.
Okay, so that's step one, extraction. What happens next? How does that raw stuff become actual capital?
It gets fed into these advanced manufacturing processes, AI, machine intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And it's fabricated into prediction products.
Prediction products.
Meaning?
Sophisticated forecasts. Predicting with increasing accuracy what you're going to do. Now, soon, later. Are you going to buy this thing? Click that ad, vote this way, support that cause.
And then these predictions get traded. The sources talk about a behavioral futures market. Now, hold on. Is that like a real stock market for our future actions? That sounds a bit sci-fi.
It does sound sci-fi, and the term is deliberately provocative, I think. It's not a physical trading floor like Wall Street, no. But it is a complex automated system where these prediction products, these guarantees about what users will do, are bought and sold.
Who is buying?
Advertisers, sure, but also insurers, political campaigns, maybe even governments.
Yeah.
Anyone who will pay for certainty about human behavior, they're trading in certainty about us.
So they're selling guaranteed outcomes, like show this ad to this group and X% will click. Essentially, yes. They're selling control over a slice of the future. Our future behavior. And that's the source of this unprecedented wealth and power. They turned the natural obscurity of human desire, as one source put it, into something predictable, measurable, and sellable.
Chilling. Okay, so they mine our data, trade predictions, but it gets worse, right? The sources say the goal shifts from just predicting our future to actively writing it for us.
Exactly, which leads us to how they expand their reach. To keep generating that surplus, they need more data. Always more. So they move beyond just tracking what we do online web crawling to what the sources call life crawling.
Life crawling. That sounds invasive.
It is. And it's driven largely by the Internet of Things, the IoT, all those smart devices, thermostats, fridges, TVs, voice assistants, robot vacuums.
The ones that are supposed to make life easier.
Right. But in this context, the sources argue smart really just becomes a euphemism for surveillance. These devices are the new hardware of surveillance capitalism, and the market growth is just staggering. You mentioned the numbers $36 billion in 2018 for smart homes, projected to hit $151 billion by 2023. That's explosive.
And that explains why big tech companies seem to be buying into everything, right? Like Google getting into smart cars or home security. It seems random, but it's not.
It's not random at all. It looks diverse on the surface, but underneath, it's all driven by the same logic. Capture more behavioral surplus. Doesn't matter if it's augmented reality glasses, self-driving cars, delivery drones. They're all just new ways to scoop up data from different parts of our lives.
Getting deeper into the fabric of daily existence.
Deeper and deeper. Think about those digital home assistants. They're not just passively waiting for commands. They're often analyzing your tone of voice, the words you choose, maybe even the pauses, to figure out your mood, your intent, capturing data you don't even realize you're giving off.
Okay, so how do they get away with this massive expansion into, our homes, our cars, our private spaces? The sources mention two key tactics: trespass and this thing called the dictatorship of no alternative.
Right. Trespass is basically the principle of move fast and break things applied to data collection. Expand your reach quickly, often without clear, legal, okay, or explicit consent.
Like it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission.
Pretty much. Or just pay the fine later. It's about erasing old ideas about private spaces, territory. Think about Google Street View cars initially mapping private Wi-Fi networks as they drove by. Or Pokemon Go placing virtual things on private property. Our spaces become their data mine.
And the second tactic, the dictatorship of no alternative. That sounds like the real trap. It sort of locks you in.
That's maybe the most insidious part. It's about making it incredibly difficult, almost impossible, to live a normal, effective modern life without opting into surveillance. You try to refuse the terms, deactivate the tracking, and there's often a steep penalty.
But isn't that just like how markets work? If I really cared about privacy, couldn't I just buy a dumb thermostat? Why call it a dictatorship?
Because the choice isn't really free when opting out is deliberately punished. Take that smart thermostat example again. If you refuse the terms of service, maybe you stop getting critical security updates. Suddenly, your smart home is easily hackable.
Or maybe core features stop working.
Right. Maybe the feature that prevents your pipes from freezing in winter gets disabled. Now you're forced to choose. Risk a burst pipe and water damage, risk getting hacked, or give up your data. The choice feels imposed, not freely made. That's the dictatorship aspect.
Okay, so the data's captured, we're kind of locked in, and then the goal changes. It's not just knowing what we'll do anymore. It's about shaping it. Behavioral actuation.
Precisely. The whole system built for watching us becomes a system for intervening, nudging, guiding, sometimes even coercing our behavior. This is a huge power shift. The digital means of production gets folded into this even bigger means of behavioral modification. The end game isn't selling you something. It's guaranteeing your behavior by actively changing it.
This feels like a really subtle, almost invisible form of control. You use the term instrumentarianism. That sounds heavy. Can we break that down?
Yeah, it's a key concept. Instrumentarianism is described as a fundamentally new kind of power, one that operates entirely through automated computational systems. It's rooted in a behaviorist view that humans are basically complex machines that can be predicted and ultimately programmed.
But how is that different from, say, old school totalitarianism?
Yeah.
Dictators definitely tried to control minds and behavior.
That's a crucial distinction. Traditional totalitarianism was deeply ideological. It cared intensely about what you believed. It used fear, propaganda, secret police, visible force to make you conform. Instrumentarian power, on the other hand, is described as disinterested.
Disinterested? How?
It doesn't really care what you believe or why you do something. It only cares that you do it. It achieves its aims invisibly through the design of digital environments, through constant A/B testing of nudges and prompts, all geared towards commercial outcomes. It's control via code, not commissars.
I see the link to things like nudge theory from behavioral economics.
Yeah.
Governments use nudges too, right?
They do, but this is what the sources call the privatization of the nudge. A government nudge might, in theory, be aimed at a public good, like encouraging retirement savings or healthier eating. A surveillance capitalist nudge is almost always designed to benefit the architect, the company, not you.
How do they implement these nudges?
Through all sorts of subtle means. Playing on social influence, your friends like this, setting defaults that steer your choices, sending perfectly timed notifications. It's about pulling psychological levers automatically at massive scale.
And they're constantly testing which levers work best.
Yeah.
On us.
Constantly. Through perpetual social experimentation. They run huge online experiments, control groups, treatment groups, testing ways to modify behavior, usually without our knowledge or consent.
Which breaks pretty much every rule of ethical research.
Completely violates the common rule, which demands informed consent. Their defense is usually something like, we need to see how people behave in the wild to get real data, which effectively turns billions of us into unwitting subjects in their ongoing behavioral modification labs.
Okay, this leads to maybe the most disturbing point in this whole mechanism. the deliberate production of unconsciousness. If the system works best when we're not aware of it, then our own awareness becomes a problem for them.
It's the biggest threat to their revenue, according to this analysis. If you realize you're being manipulated, you might resist. You're less predictable, less controllable. So the argument goes, SC actively works to keep its operations below the threshold of awareness. By making the systems opaque, complex, embedding the nudges seamlessly into the user experience, basically preserving our unawareness ensures the manipulation stays effective. It creates this huge imbalance. They learned everything about us from our data, while we remain intentionally ignorant about how they're using that knowledge to shape us.
Right. So if the whole system is designed to keep us unaware and nudge our behavior, the inevitable result has to be, well, a breakdown in our ability to think clearly, individually, and together. This cognitive crisis you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It's the point where the control over the means of cognition starts to genuinely impair our collective ability to make sense of the world, to tell truth from manipulation.
And a big part of that is algorithmic authority and bias, right? We tend to trust computers, think they're objective.
We do. There's this deep-seated cultural assumption that math equals neutrality. But algorithms project this algorithmic authority that often isn't earned. The results feel objective, but they can be deeply biased.
And this bias isn't just random noise. It's systematic, repeatable, often harmful. How does it get into the system in the first place?
The sources point to three main ways bias creeps in, and they're crucial to understanding why algorithms are never truly neutral. First, there's pre-existing societal inequities.
Meaning the algorithm learns our past mistakes.
Precisely. If the data you train an algorithm on reflects historical discrimination, gender bias, racial bias, whatever, the algorithm doesn't magically fix it. It just learns the patterns and automates them. Sometimes it even amplifies them.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, there was this early medical school admission system back in the 80s, I think. It used historical admissions data to guide decisions. But because those past decisions were biased against women and minorities,
the algorithm just learned to replicate that bias.
Exactly. It ended up systematically disadvantaging qualified women and minority applicants purely based on the biased historical data it was fed. It efficiently perpetuated the discrimination of the past.
Okay, so garbage in, garbage out, essentially.
Yeah.
What's the second source of bias?
Feedback loops. This is where the algorithm's own output influences the world, and that new reality gets fed back in as more data, reinforcing the initial bias.
Like a vicious cycle.
Totally. Think about predictive policing models. An initial data set might show more reported crime in certain neighborhoods, often due to historical over-policing. The model then suggests sending more police there.
Which leads to more arrests and reported incidents in those same areas.
Right, which gets fed back into the model, confirming its prediction and leading to even more police allocation. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, potentially entrenching biased policing based on flawed initial inputs.
And the third source is just plain old money.
Pretty much. Commercial influences. Algorithms are often tweaked, sometimes invisibly, to prioritize the financial interests of their owners. We've seen examples with flight search engines, like one used by American Airlines, that allegedly prioritized its own flights, even if they weren't the cheapest or fastest option for the user.
So the algorithm isn't optimizing for my best interest, but for theirs.
Often, yes. It guides you down paths that maximize their profit, not necessarily your utility or well-being.
Okay, so we have biased algorithms eroding critical thinking. And this seems to directly feed into the breakdown of a shared reality. We end up in these personalized filter bubbles.
And the business model thrives on it. Outrage, conflict, polarization. That stuff drives engagement. It keeps you clicking, scrolling, feeding the machine. The sources point out how falsehoods spread way faster online than truth, like 6 times faster.
It just shreds trust.
Exactly.
Right.
And without shared facts, without trust, how can you even have a shared reality? It becomes impossible. The incentive structure actively corrodes the basis for consensus.
This makes that story about the engineer's father in South Korea even more chilling. It's like a case study in reality capture.
It really is. Here's this retired engineer, right? A guy trained in logic, facts, verification. But his family finds he's become almost unrecognizable. Why? His YouTube algorithm had slowly, steadily fed him this diet of hyper-nationalist conspiratorial content.
It created a whole separate world for him on his screen.
A completely separate reality. One that was emotionally potent, maybe even satisfying in some way, but totally detached from verifiable facts. He wasn't stupid, he was conditioned. The platform literally designed his perception, privatized his reality, all to keep his attention hooked.
If the problem is this deep biased code, profit motives driving division, reality itself being fractured, why is it so damn hard for researchers or regulators or even us to get a clear picture and hold these systems accountable?
Well, there are some major roadblocks built into the system, shielding it from scrutiny. The first big one is just sheer complexity, often called black boxing.
Meaning even the creators don't fully understand how it works.
Often, yes. These systems, especially modern machine learning models, are incredibly complex networks of interacting parts. It can be genuinely difficult, sometimes impossible, even for the engineers who built them, to trace exactly why a specific output occurred. It's not just one black box, it's nested black boxes interacting.
Too complex, too fast.
And too personalized. That's another layer. Machine learning creates a unique experience for every user. You mentioned Bing running millions of variations a day. How can you audit something that's constantly changing and different for everyone? It makes generalized study incredibly tricky.
Okay, complexity is one barrier. What else?
Proprietary secrecy. Let's be honest, these algorithms are incredibly valuable trade secrets. Companies guard them fiercely. This makes independent auditing almost impossible. And often they use the complexity argument as a convenient shield for this secrecy.
So we can't see inside because it's too complex, but also because it's their secret sauce.
Right. It obscures potentially unethical methods, biases, or manipulative techniques from public view and accountability.
So if the tech is this powerful, this hidden, and the stated goal is increasingly about behavioral modification, even automating us, then this idea of colonizing the mind stops being a metaphor.
That's the sobering endpoint the sources point towards. It becomes a literal technical possibility, especially with the rise of neurointerface technologies, think Neuralink and similar projects.
Brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah. If they're already mining and trading the data from our clicks and swipes, the next logical step is tapping directly into the brain's signals. The struggle for freedom, for autonomy, might soon involve literally defending the physical brain itself from being mined and monetized, protecting the wetware.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. If the problem is that profound, attacking the very basis of thought, then the solution has to be equally fundamental. This brings us to cognitive liberation. It sounds less like storming the barricades and more like mental self-defense.
That's a good way to put it. It's reframing the fight. Historically, liberation meant overcoming physical or economic oppression. Now, the argument is the primary struggle is against invisible cognitive control. It's about reclaiming the ability to think for ourselves.
So what does cognitive sovereignty, having that control back, actually look like? How is it defined?
It's defined as the capacity, the ability to think clearly, consciously, deliberately, especially when you're immersed in a reality that's actively engineered to distract you, divide you, deceive you. It's about being the author of your own thoughts, not just reacting on autopilot.
And losing that sovereignty means?
You become programmable. You live in constant reaction. Your identity gets shaped by the loudest voices, the most engaging algorithms. You end up trading your own clarity for the feeling of belonging to some tribe. And the sources argue our whole upbringing kind of set us up for this. Schools teaching obedience, media teaching outrage, tech teaching speed.
Yeah.
All undermining focused, independent thought.
Okay, so the first step towards getting that sovereignty back is recognizing how we're being manipulated. Identifying the hijackers.
Yeah.
The sources lay out 5 main vectors of mental hijacking. What are they?
First up is algorithmic environments. These are the digital spaces themselves, designed to sculpt our mental state. They prioritize novelty, outrage, anything that triggers a dopamine hit. They fragment our attention into these tiny loops, effectively training our nervous systems to crave constant stimulation and chaos. It changes how our brains work.
Okay, the environment itself. What's the second vector? It's about belief.
Ideological captivity. This is when your sense of self gets completely fused with a particular belief system, political, social, whatever. These systems often reward conformity and punish questioning. They give you a neat package, an identity, a moral code, clear enemies, us versus them.
So questioning the ideology feels like questioning yourself.
Exactly. It feels threatening, dangerous, which shuts down critical thinking. Certainty feels safe, even if it's based on flawed premises.
And we know emotion is the shortcut past logic.
Absolutely. That's emotional exploitation. These systems are masters at weaponizing strong emotions: fear, anger, shame, tribal loyalty. They bypass rational thought by anchoring narratives in these powerful feelings, maybe even linking them to past traumas. When a belief is tied to deep emotion or trauma, challenging it feels like an attack, making reasoned discussion impossible.
Then there's messing with the tools we actually use to think language itself.
Language distortion. This is huge. Controlling the definitions, controlling the words, controls the debate. Language gets deliberately vague or uses euphemisms or employs emotionally loaded terms to shut down thought. Think about how dissent might be reframed as violence or asking questions as causing harm. If you can't use clear, specific language, you can't think clearly.
And the final vector is just too much information.
Information saturation, just overwhelming the system, creating a constant fog of noise, updates, opinions, crises. This leads to chronic confusion, decision fatigue, emotional numbness. You just can't process it all. So what do? You retreat to simplistic answers, tribal certainty, rather than doing the hard work of thinking things through yourself.
Okay, seeing those 5 vectors laid out, algorithms, ideology, emotion, language, overload, that's like diagnosing the illness. How do we start the cure? What's the actual practice, the discipline of restoration to rebuild our mental defenses?
It requires conscious effort, internal structure, discipline awareness. It's like building mental muscle.
Yeah.
There's that really telling anecdote about the high school teachers in Spain.
Right, the ones whose students found reading stressful.
Physically stressful, yeah. They realized their students, conditioned by constant short-form digital content, had lost the cognitive endurance to follow a long-form text, like a novel. Sustained focus had literally become painful for them.
So what did the teachers do?
They instituted an unplugged class, a digital detox during school hours. They read classic novels aloud, simply forcing the students to sit, listen, be present, and follow a single, coherent narrative thread for an extended period. It sounds simple, but it was hard work, the hard work of reclaiming the mind from that constant digital fragmentation.
That's a powerful example. So what are the specific practical steps the sources suggest for this cognitive restoration? It starts with attention, right?
Attention control is foundational. Attention is the gateway, the bottleneck. Reclaiming it is step 1. This means deliberate practice, single tasking, resisting the urge to constantly switch, mindful consumption of media, maybe scheduling deep work sessions, making your mind an active filter, not just a passive receiver.
And then creating that space between stimulus and response.
Yes, cognitive reframing. It's about building that crucial mental pause. An event happens, an emotion flares up. Instead of reacting instantly, you create a small gap. You observe the trigger, notice the feeling, and then choose a response deliberately. It's the difference between being run by your impulses, or the algorithm triggering them, and being in the driver's seat.
We also need to question the information itself constantly.
That's narrative scrutiny, cultivating a healthy skepticism, always asking, who benefits from this message? What's the underlying assumption here? Why am I seeing this now? What frame is being used and what's being left out? Treating information not as received wisdom, but as something to be interrogated.
And literally disconnecting sometimes.
Absolutely. The cognitive detox, scheduled periods of being unplugged. Digital Sabbaths, whatever you call it. Giving your mind a chance to clear the noise, process things more deeply, reset. You can't hear the signal through the static if you never turn the static down.
Finally, getting a grip on language again.
Reclaiming language. This is about being precise. Consciously choosing clear, specific words instead of vague, loaded, or emotionally manipulative terms. Thinking precisely makes you harder to manipulate. It's like mental hygiene for your vocabulary. Using words to clarify thought, not obscure it.
Okay, so we've got the economic engine, the mechanisms of control, the personal toolkit for restoration. But this feels bigger than just individual effort. It's a systemic problem. What about collective action?
It has to be collective, too. The sources argue that this movement for cognitive liberation needs to demand systemic changes. We need schools that teach critical judgment, not just compliance. Media that aims to deepen understanding, not just farm outrage. Technology designed to support genuine human connection and well-being, not just maximize engagement time.
So pushing back on the institutions.
Yes, and doing it with moral clarity, demanding transparency, demanding accountability from the companies, and yes, governments that control these vast information ecosystems. The point is made that silence or passive acceptance in the face of this level of cognitive control is a form of complicity.
We've certainly taken a deep dive here. The core idea that the factory is obsolete and the real power lies in controlling the means of cognition seems hard to refute when you look at the evidence presented. Our attention, our data, it's not just currency, it's the raw material for shaping our future behavior, eroding our autonomy.
And the sources are pretty clear that this challenge instrumentarian power, surveillance capitalism, it's fundamentally new. Our old tools for resistance, whether political or economic, might not be enough. That's why these new concepts like instrumentarianism itself, behavioral surplus, cognitive liberation, They're necessary just to understand what we're up against.
So the goal isn't really about smashing the machines, is it? It's about achieving mental sovereignty, being the one who ultimately filters the information, chooses the response, rather than just being a node reacting to whatever the network throws at you, protecting that capacity for focus as if it were a vital resource. Because it is.
I think the fundamental takeaway is this. The fight for freedom in our century really comes down to defending our basic human capacity to think clearly, to imagine freely, to discern wisely. The next big revolution might not be about seizing the means of production. It might be about rebuilding consciousness.
Right.
And that starts not out there in the streets necessarily, but right here between your ears.
Okay, let's unpack this. If Marx told us that matter determines mind, what the digital age suggests is that technology, by controlling cognition, now determines the matter of our shared reality. The question is no longer who owns the factory, but who controls the architecture of your thought. That's the real deep dive.